Hi everyone, I've had my Tesla 2024 Model 3 for 6 months now. So I thought this would be a good time to go over what it's like to own a Tesla over the past half year, especially what it's like to have a Model 3 when we have solar panels and a Tesla Powerwall. I've seen lots of videos out there about what it's like to own a Tesla, but for some reason, I couldn't find any videos about what it's like to own a Tesla car and a Tesla Powerwall. I think having both a Tesla Powerwall and a Tesla EV is one of the best things about having a Tesla. And no other EV or car company that I know of can do this because they simply aren't in the home battery or solar business like Tesla. And they don't seem to have the same focus on software and app experience like Tesla does. Installing solar panels on this house was one of the first things we did when we bought it. A few years after that, we got a Tesla Powerwall 2, and a few years after that, we got a Model 3. I was honestly considering other brands of EVs such as BYD, Hyundai, or Kia, but I really felt like since we already had the Tesla app for the Powerwall, there would be some better integration if we got a Tesla EV. The same thinking applied when getting an EV charger installed at home. My family in Canada, who already had Teslas, kept telling me to just use the mobile charger and plug it in overnight. The mobile charger can only charge at about 2 kilowatts, which is fairly slow, but overnight it can easily make up for your daily or even weekly drive. The big difference between their situation and mine was that Canada has incredibly cheap electricity due to their vast amounts of hydroelectric dams. And here in Australia, we have stronger sunlight to power solar panels. So my goal was to charge my car as much as possible using solar power, which meant that I needed high power while the sun was up, and not lower power for longer times overnight. I've got an 8.7 kilowatt solar system, so I figured I needed an EV charger that could do at least 7 kilowatts if I wanted to make the most of my solar system. So I decided to get a Tesla wall charger. Honestly, I don't know if the Tesla wall charger does much compared to other EV chargers, and it is actually one of the cheaper EV chargers. It was only $800 compared to the $500 mobile charger. Some smart EV chargers can be double that cost. The expensive part was getting the electricians to come out and wire it up, and as a bonus, I got a little wall charger image in my Tesla app. Honestly, I'd say that is worth a little extra. The smarter EV chargers can communicate with your battery and solar system and can enable some great features, such as only charging the EV with excess solar power. That is, you can prioritize where the solar power is used first and ensure that you are not using any energy from the grid unless you choose to. The reason I went with the cheaper, dumber Tesla wall charger was that I could do the very same thing just using the Tesla app. Since I have the Tesla Powerwall and the Tesla app, the Model 3 and the Powerwall can communicate with each other, and the Model 3 will only draw the amount of electricity that the Powerwall says is excess solar power that would normally just be sold back into the grid. Let me show you what that looks like. I've got the Tesla widget on the home screen of my iPhone here, and you can choose 5 quick actions to put there. So I've got lock, climate control, vent windows, and opening the frunk and trunk. When you go into the app, you can see right now that my Model 3 is plugged in, but it's not charging as it's nighttime, and it's waiting for sufficient solar. The little sun icon next to the battery symbol means that I have the Charge on Solar option enabled, which I will get into later in the video. If I swipe to the right, you get a different page for the Powerwall. I'm going to spend some time going over the Powerwall side of things before getting to the car side of things, so if you already have a Powerwall and are familiar with the app, feel free to skip ahead to the car part. Okay, here you can see the Powerwall has a 42% charge, and the house is drawing 300 watts from it. If you click on the Energy button, it will take you to the graphs. At the bottom, you can see the buttons to go to the graphs for home usage, car, Powerwall, solar panels, and the grid. This page shows you solar data, and you can see that we had a clear sunny day today with a nice smooth curve for solar generation. Everything is color-coded: blue for home usage, green for Powerwall, gray for grid, and red for the car. At the top, you can see the solar panels generated almost 60 kilowatt hours today. And at the bottom, it breaks it down and tells you where all that electricity went. You can tap and hold on any part of the graph, drag back and forth, and see the exact breakdown of where that electricity went at that time. I love how the area under the curve is colored in, giving an excellent visual representation of how much power is used for what. Today's a weekday, so you can see that most of the power generated today was just fed into the grid. You can see the Powerwall charging up for the first few hours, and you can even see tiny slivers of red because I was just able to charge a bit before I left for work in the morning and a bit when I got home. It's spring here in Australia, but during the winter it was dark when I left for work and when I got home, so that wasn't possible. I'm hoping to get a little bit more when it's the summer, but realistically, our energy usage totally changes when it gets so hot that we have the air conditioner running all day. All right, let's have a quick look at what you can see if you click on the other buttons at the bottom. For my car, you can see a few sharp spikes before I left in the morning and when I got home in the evening. Again, they are color-coded, so you can see the green came from the Powerwall, yellow came from solar. If you click on the Powerwall tab, you can see a few different things. First of all, the yellow under the zero on the y-axis is the solar power charging the Powerwall. Then, above that, you can see the blue power going into the house and red going into the car. Beneath that whole graph is a separate one that shows the state of charge of the Powerwall over the day. Again, you can tap and drag to see the details of any particular time of the day for both the state of charge and the power inputs and outputs. If you click on the house, you can see that we've used 14.4 kilowatt hours today so far. 58% has been solar and 40% has been from the Powerwall. Lastly, if you click on the grid icon, you can see the big chunk of solar power that has been exported to the grid, 42.6 kilowatt hours today. Okay, let's go back to the solar tab and choose a different timescale. So far, we have only been looking at one particular day, but we can also look at a month view. Today is the 1st of November, so we only have one day here, but let's swipe back to last month. Now I can see all the data in a beautiful color-coded stacked bar graph. My solar system generated 1,388.1 kilowatt hours last month, and you can see exactly where all that power went each day. Again, you can tap and drag across the graph to see more details for individual days. You can even see that in early October I was able to charge my car during the weekdays, as I was on holiday then. You can tap on the car icon and you can see the power sources for charging my car. You can see I've done quite well in October, almost not touching the grid at all. You can tap on the home icon and see the same sort of data for your home usage. Here you can see that we used 204.6 kilowatt hours from the Powerwall. Actually, if you want to know about the Powerwall, you can just click on the Powerwall icon and easily see how much usage you are getting from it. Interestingly, you can see a fairly sizable difference between the charged and discharged amounts, which to me means there is a fair amount of inefficiency in the system. Side note here, I've had the Powerwall for about 5 years, and the Powerwall has a warranty for at least 70% capacity after 10 years. I've contacted Tesla about the apparent reduced capacity of my Powerwall, and they have said that it looks like I will be able to make a warranty claim in the future. But currently, it is still working at over 70% capacity, and I will have to wait until it drops below that before making the warranty claim. That suits me fine, as I think it just means I get a replacement later instead of now. But in any case, if the Powerwall discharged 218.6 kilowatt hours last month, and I would normally pay 61 cents a kilowatt hour, then that means the Powerwall has saved me $133.46 this month. But why stop there? We can just change the timescale to lifetime and see that we have discharged 12 megawatt hours from the Powerwall. We can just bring up the calculator to see that 12,000 kilowatt hours at 61 cents per kilowatt hour would be $7,320 that we have saved from our Powerwall, and we have had it for about 5 years. You can look at graphs for solar, home, and grid usage. If you love data and graphs, you can just get lost in here for hours, looking at patterns in seasonal usage over the years, etc. Okay, let's get back to the car side of things. Here's a day when the sun is up and I'm charging the car. Now you can see it says that it is charging on solar. The little sun icon is lit up yellow, and the charging cable is showing yellow energy flowing into the car. You can see I'm currently charging at 4 kilowatts, 6 amps, and 240 volts. I also get a little 3 icon because I am using three-phase power. By the way, as another little side note here, I think Australia has a really good advantage here for EVs, as the higher voltage than North America, as well as the availability of three-phase power, makes charging much more efficient and safe here. 6 amps in North America using 120 volts and single-phase power would get you less than 1 kilowatt, and fewer homes in North America have access to three-phase power. Anyway, swiping over to the Powerwall side of things, you can see the car in the garage plugged into the wall charger. You can see the solar panels are generating about 7.2 kilowatts, and you can see it flowing into the home, the Model 3, and the Powerwall. If we look at the graphs, you can see a big amount of red there. Now, the blue line is a bit deceiving. If we tap and drag to see right at this moment at 11:20 a.m., you will see that it thinks that the house is drawing 6.7 kilowatts, and the car isn't drawing any power. But if you go back to the last data point at 11:10, you can see that it reads 0.3 for the house and 6.5 kilowatts for the car. I think since the wall charger is essentially just plugged into our house switchboard, it has trouble telling where that power is going initially, so it reads it as house usage. However, it will compensate for the EV charging after the fact and change it to red later, if that makes sense. I will show you the same graph from later today to show you that it will change it to red later. If you go back to the main Powerwall dashboard, it shows more accurate real-time data. It looks like the house usage has just shot up to 2.1 kilowatts. Maybe someone has turned on a kettle or something. Okay, here I am a few hours later. One of the things I forgot to show before was how to switch on the Charge on Solar feature. One thing I wish someone mentioned to me was that it might not show up for you right away. I'm not sure why, but I had to wait for a week or two after getting my Model 3 before the option for pairing the Powerwall and Model 3 came up. Once that gets set up, you get these three dots here, and you can click Charge on Solar and turn it on. You then get an extra little slider on your charging limit bar. You can set the lower limit for when you want to charge on solar. The lowest you can set the lower limit to is 30%, meaning that if your car is over 30%, it will not charge unless there is extra solar generation. I should emphasize the extra part. The house will always use the solar power first, then it will charge the car second. Third in priority is the Powerwall, and exporting to the grid is always the last resort. If the car has less than 30% when I plug it in, it will charge to 30, using whatever power is available, including the Powerwall and grid. The upper limit slider works the same as any other Tesla, so if you don't want to charge to 100%, you don't have to. I've got a 2024 Model 3 with the LFP battery pack, so it tells you to keep it at 100. I wish I could set the lower limit lower, as 30% seems quite conservative. I generally use 10% a day or so with my daily commute, maybe more if it's a hot day, so 30% can last me a full 2 days. Sometimes I get to the weekend with maybe 10% left, and I have to stop the charging until the sun comes up. Otherwise, it will draw power from the grid. Anyway, let's have a look at the graph again to see if that blue house usage has been changed to red. Yep. You can see here, there was a little 2 kilowatt spike at around 11:20, right around tea time, so it must have been a kettle. But you can see that the rest has turned to red. I'm not sure how necessary the Tesla wall charger is to this whole process. The wall charger is not listed as one of the necessary requirements for the Charge on Solar option on the Tesla website. So I'm pretty sure you could do all this with a mobile charger or any other charger. However, if you just used a mobile charger with a maximum charging rate of 2 kilowatts, you wouldn't be taking full advantage of your solar system unless you had a very small solar system. If I were charging at 2 kilowatts, you would have to imagine the red part of the solar graph cut off at 2 kilowatts, with everything above it being gray, exporting to the grid. It would also mean that it would take more than 2 days on the weekend to charge on solar. So for the 6 months that I have owned this Model 3, it has generally taken 2 days of sun on Saturday and Sunday to get a full charge after using it for a week. Just for reference, My commute is 22 kilometers each way and involves going up quite a big hill and coming down again. So your mileage may vary. I bought the Model 3 in May, right in the middle of winter, so there were more cloudy days and the sun was weaker. I haven't hit the summer months yet, so the stronger, longer sunlight might mean that I could charge the car in one day for the whole week. However, generally speaking, the spring and autumn months have been the best for us, as we do not have the heating and cooling on in the house. I've also noticed a significant amount of power used by the Model 3 to keep the cabin cool while it is parked outside on hot days, so that might also get worse in the summer. So, how much money have I spent on the Model 3 in 6 months? How does that compare to my last car, which was a 2011 Toyota Yaris? Let's get into some calculations. Over 6 months, I've clocked 6,927 kilometers on the odometer. Now there are two different numbers available to think of here for how much power I've used. According to the tripometer in the Model 3, it has used 829 kilowatt hours, which works out to 120 watt hours per kilometer. However, if I look over at my Powerwall app and look at the vehicle power usage for the year, it says that it has been charged for 1,194.1 kilowatt hours. 829 kilowatt hours versus 1,194 kilowatt hours is a difference of 365 kilowatt hours, which is a big difference. What I think is happening here is that the tripometer is only taking into account the power used while driving the car. The Powerwall data would include all power going into the car, so that would perhaps include charging inefficiencies, as well as power used for preconditioning the car, Sentry mode, and cabin overheat protection. Over 6 months, the difference of 365 kilowatt hours is about 2 kilowatt hours a day. If I think about the car HVAC running in the morning to precondition the car, and maybe for a couple of hours a day while outside in the hot Australian sun, I think that could explain it. If I get into the car after a hot day, the Energy app in the Model 3 will tell me that it has used maybe 2 to 3% of the battery for cabin overheat protection, and it recommends parking in the shade or plugging it in while parked, both of which are not an option for me at work. I think these explanations make sense, but it might also mean that about 30% of the energy usage is not used while driving. So now I have a choice when comparing it to my previous combustion car. If I want to know how much money I have saved on fuel, do I use the 829 kilowatt hours used, 120 watt hours per kilometer from the tripometer, or do you use the bigger number that includes all the extra features that were not possible with my old car? I would have loved to remotely turn the AC on before I got into my old Toyota on those hot days. You know those summer days when you get in the car and it is like an absolute oven. When you blast the AC on high, but the car is so damn hot that maybe you get a slightly cooler breeze hitting your face from the AC, but you're still sweating all over because your seat, the steering wheel, and every surface of the car remains burning hot for half an hour. How many things have been totally ruined because they have been sitting in your car on a hot day? I've lost some fairly valuable receipts because the thermal paper they were printed on turned completely black in the car. I don't get any of that in the Model 3 anymore, but it does take electricity. Also, on the other side, on cold days, how nice is it to sit down in a nice, warm, cozy, preheated car? These sorts of niceties will not come out in the calculations, so just keep that in the back of your mind. Okay, so let's calculate using the bigger number. Looking at the Powerwall data for the lifetime of the Model 3, it has used 1,194.1 kilowatt hours. 6% of that has come from the Powerwall for 80.9 kilowatt hours. 67% has come directly from solar for 802.3 kilowatt hours. 27% has come from the grid for 310.9 kilowatt hours. Calculating the grid power cost is fairly straightforward, as I have a simple, flat rate electricity plan, which is 61 cents per kilowatt hour. So multiplying that gets me $190.86. Now, for the solar and Powerwall parts, I'm going to combine them as the Powerwall is always charged by solar anyway. So that gives me 883.2 kilowatt hours. I've also got to think about what solar actually costs. On one hand, you could view it as essentially free, as there are no running costs for my solar system. The other way you could look at it is by doing some more complicated calculations involving the initial cost of the solar system. I'm going to make it simple by just taking the opportunity costs for using solar power. If I didn't charge my car with that power, it would have just been fed back into the grid. And again, I've got a fairly simple electricity plan that gives me 15 cents per kilowatt hour for a feed-in tariff. So 883.2 kilowatt hours times 15 cents gives me $132.48. Add that to the grid costs, and that gives me a total of $323.34 to run my Model 3 for 6 months. I should mention here that the Powerwall data is absolutely essential here. In the Model 3 page of the Tesla app, there is a Charge Stats tab that is supposed to help with these sorts of calculations. However, it does not have any data at all for solar or grid usage. It only makes a distinction between charging at home versus charging at work, at a supercharger, or other. I can see that being useful for some people, but it just doesn't apply to me. I cannot charge at work. I have never charged at a supercharger, and I don't even have a mobile charger to charge at another location. That one little gray bit of other was when the car was charged at the Tesla delivery center before handing it over to me. Also, the total charged number is different. This screen grab was taken a couple of days after the other ones, and after I finished a full charge, so it is actually 40 kilowatt hours lower than what the Powerwall data shows. I think this is because the charge stats here only record charged power, but does not record when the Model 3 is plugged in and running something like the HVAC. In this case, the car is not charging, but it is still using power. The petrol savings section tries to give a good estimate, but without the solar data, it will just assume that you are paying full electricity prices, which for me is very high, since I've chosen a plan with the highest solar feed-in tariff. You can click on the I to see some average petrol prices history, which is excellent. Now, I'm not going to use their petrol equivalent number there, because I'm not quite sure how they got that number and what a petrol equivalent car is. I'm going to use data from my previous car, the 2011 Toyota Yaris, and I'm going to use real-world data. Now, I drove that Yaris for almost 10 years, doing the same commute and living the same basic lifestyle, and I had to fill up just over 40 liters for just over 500 kilometers. I admit these are rough numbers and anecdotal, but it does make the math easy. So 500 kilometers divided by 40 liters gives me a fuel efficiency of 12.5 kilometers per liter, or 0.08 liters per kilometer. 0.08 liters per kilometer times 6,927 kilometers is 554.16 liters. Using an average of $1.85 per liter, using the data from the Tesla Charge Stats, would mean that driving that Yaris for the past 6 months would have cost $1,025.20 in fuel. Remember, the cost of electricity for my Model 3 for 6 months was $323.34. That's a difference of $701.85 over 6 months, and that includes the 30% extra energy to power the HVAC and other features while I'm not driving the car. The other thing is maintenance. The reason I have waited until 6 months of ownership to make these calculations is because I was taking my Yaris in for service every 6 months. I kept track of the cost of services going back to 2019 and got an average of $592 per service. This would include everything, including wheel alignments, brake pads, 12-volt batteries, oil and other fluid changes, and new tires. I'll have to get wheel alignments and new tires on my Model 3 at some point, but I do not have the data for that yet. So if I add the $592 for service, that means I have saved $1,293.94 in 6 months by having a Tesla. Multiply that by 2, and I can save $2,587.87 every year with a Tesla. Of course, take that with a grain of salt, as we will have to see how summer and autumn go, and new tires and wheel alignments will also cut into that too. Let me know in the comments what you think about my calculations. Did I miss anything? I hope you have found this video useful for seeing what it's like to own a Tesla vehicle, as well as a Tesla Powerwall with solar panels. Thanks for watching.